Let us pray. Our Father, keep us mindful of the special and unique opportunity we have to work for our constituents and our province. And in that work, give us both strength and wisdom. Amen.
Introduction of visitors.
Mr. Speaker, on September 19, 1985, a horrified world learned about the disastrous earthquake in Mexico City that destroyed hundreds of buildings and left thousands dead, injured, or trapped in the wreckage. As resources were mobilized from many countries, a group of volunteers here in Alberta pooled their resources and skills as emergency physicians and paramedics and prepared to do what they could to help. With the support and the assistance of the Honorary Council of the Government of Mexico in Edmonton, Mr. Angus MacDonald, and in Calgary, Mr. Alan Graham, a group of young men put together a remarkable humanitarian effort. They organized themselves and quite an incredible amount of supplies generously donated by many companies in Alberta and Western Canada. Within a few days, this group and an aircraft load of supplies departed from Mexico City, and a week of grueling, traumatic work helping to locate and find victims of this terrible earthquake. They were followed the next week by others who were prepared to help where they could. The role of the Government of Alberta was to help where possible, and Alberta matched the generous relief contributions organized by the honorary consuls. No province in this country and no single group in Alberta did more or responded more generously than Albertans. Some $300,000 was provided via 10 different non-government organizations. Today, the government acknowledged this effort and saluted the volunteer spirit and humanitarian concern of those who participated in this brave and imaginative undertaking. It was much appreciated by Mexico, by our federal government, and by Albertans who are proud of such initiatives. Their efforts typifies a spirit that we in Alberta hold to be important, to get things done that have to be done, and to be concerned for our fellow man. As well, these young men are organizing through their own initiative an Alberta Disaster Response Association that will be ready to react should similar disasters occur throughout the world. Mr. Speaker, I would like to introduce to you and to all of our colleagues, and as I call their name, I would ask them to stand, Mr. Alan Graham, Honorary Consul, Government of Mexico, Calgary. Mr. Mark Egner, Managing Director, Alberta Public Safety Services, and Mr. Speaker, the volunteers of the original team who are in your gallery. Dr. Alan Osford, Mr. Bruce Berry, Mr. Grant Brills, Mr. Rainey Dubord, Mr. Brian Mackey, Mr. James Parker Matheson, Dr. David Montoya, Dr. Peter McGuire, Mr. Mark O'Flanagan, Mr. Steve Spiegelman, Dr. Merrill Steed, Mr. Rod Waring, Mr. David Kerr, Mr. George Foster, and Mr. William Davies. One member of the original team, Mr. John Bowman, is out of the province. Mr. Speaker, these outstanding Albertans are in your gallery, and I believe it would be most appropriate for our colleagues to welcome them to the Assembly today.
Presenting petitions. Reading and receiving petitions.
Mr. Speaker, I would request that you direct the clerk to read and receive the petition that I submitted to the legislature yesterday.
To the Honourable, the Legislative Assembly of Alberta in Legislature Assembled. The petition of the undersigned residents who now avail themselves of their ancient and undoubted right thus to present a grievance common to your petitioners in the certain assurance that your Honourable House will therefore provide a remedy, humbly showeth, whereas as representatives of sound and closed-circuit television contracting firms in Alberta, we feel that small business should not have to compete unfairly with Alberta Government Telephones, and whereas Alberta Government Telephones is an Alberta Crown Corporation and is owned by the Government of Alberta, to which all Alberta citizens pay taxes, and whereas the private sector is capable of providing sound and closed-circuit television sales and service to all of Alberta, wherefore the undersigned, your petitioners, humbly pray and call upon the Legislative Assembly of Alberta to end this unfair competition between Alberta government telephones and small business in the sound and closed-circuit television contracting industry. Presenting reports by standing and special committees. Notices of motions. Introduction of bills. Tabling returns and reports.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to table the answer to question 184.
Introduction of special guests.
Highwood.
Mr. Speaker, we have within the confines of this legislature 4 very remarkable, energetic, thoughtful and concerned citizens, all representatives of the Turner Valley Oilfield Society, who are here today presenting a development proposal soon to be circulated for an international caliber historic and tourist attraction located in Turner Valley and benefiting that oilfield region. I know you will all join me in wishing them every success in this fantastic endeavor. Mr. Speaker, I present to you in the members' gallery Danae Lott, President of the Society, Vicki Adamson, Mayor of Turner Valley, Lori Clausen, a Western DeKalb Petroleum, and David Finch, the Society historian. I would ask them to rise en masse and receive the warm welcome of the House.
Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to introduce to you and to all the members of the House some 96 students in the grade 6 class from Duggan Elementary School in Edmonton Whitemud. I had an opportunity to meet with them earlier. They are studying government now in their class. They are in both the members and the public gallery. They are accompanied by 4 teachers, Mr. Ostfield, Mr. Springer, Mrs. Danielle, Mr. Kulak, and 1 parent, Mrs. Kernahan. I'd ask them to stand, please, and be recognized by members of the Assembly.
Westlock Sturgeon, followed by Red Deer South, followed by Minister of Agriculture.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to introduce to you and through you to the legislature a special guest from a special constituency, constituency of Edmonton Whitemud. The special guest is Camille Harrison, 10 years old, from the Westbrook School in the constituency, and she has come to the legislature to observe government in action along with her brother Sean and her mother Karen. Would they stand and accept the congratulations of the constituent?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a pleasure for me to introduce to you and through you to the members of the Legislative Assembly 50 well-behaved grade 6 students from the Annie L. Gates School located in the constituency of Red Deer South. They are accompanied by 2 of their teachers, Mrs. Jean Rathwell and Mrs. Marilyn Ganger, and by 2 of the 2 parents, Mrs. Donna Meter and Mrs. Edith Kerber, who is also a good family friend. I would point out, Mr. Speaker, that yesterday I was a guest of Annie L. Gates School and had the opportunity of meeting with these students and their teachers, and they asked some very good questions. Today, Mr. Speaker, they are our guests, and they are seated in the public gallery, and I would ask that they would rise and receive the warm welcome of this Assembly.
Mr. Speaker, it's my pleasure to introduce to you, sir, and to members of the Legislative Assembly 3 individuals who are very outstanding in the role of agriculture in our province of Alberta. And I begin by introducing Doug Livingston, the President of the Alberta Wheat Pool, Mr. Ray Schmidt, the First Vice President of the Alberta Wheat Pool, and Peggy Lesueur-Reimer, Policy Analysis from the Alberta Wheat Pool also, and I would ask the 3 if they would rise and receive the very warm welcome of this Assembly.
Ministerial statements. Oral question period.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to direct the first question to the Minister of Education. Mr. Speaker, some 180 school districts around the province are in the process of implementing the cutbacks in school funding ordered by this government. Mr. Speaker, the implementation of the 3% cut, compounded by increases in costs, which are beyond the control of trustees, has led to thousands of job losses and major tax increases to homeowners. Clearly, Mr. Speaker, this government is responsible for these measures. My question to the minister, does the minister have information on the total job losses from the school systems in the province, and will she state whether these job cuts are within the range forecast by the government at the time it implemented the spending cuts?
That was clearly two questions, Mr. Speaker. No, I do not have a number of teachers who will be affected by a process which is ongoing right now in the public and separate school system.
Mr. Speaker, is the minister saying then that they brought in a policy and they have no idea what is occurring in the province? Is the minister saying that they're not even monitoring to know what is going on in the province?
That was not the original question, Mr. Speaker. School boards in this province are given the authority, and appropriately, I would say, to hire the teachers for the delivery of their program. These trustees are elected across the province. There are about 1,000 of them, and they set up teacher contracts, not the Minister of Education. In answer to the fourth question, which was his second, I am monitoring the implementation across the province and will always be monitoring it and continuing it through a very difficult fiscal process.
Mr. Speaker, if the minister is monitoring it, surely she would know how many jobs are being lost. I might point out, Mr. Speaker, the two city school districts in Edmonton, for example, have been forced to eliminate 253 teaching positions and 234 non-teaching positions for a total of 487. My question to the minister, how can the minister claim, as she has done in this assembly, that there is no loss of educational opportunity because of these cuts?
Mr. Speaker, all of what goes on in education in this province does not occur solely in the cities of Edmonton and Calgary, and the Honourable Leader of the Opposition would be well advised to look at the very fine job that school boards across this province are doing in dealing with a difficult fiscal year. One of the main considerations in the Provincial Treasurer's presentation on March 20th of the education budget, and mine supplementally on the last Thursday evening, was to indicate that there was a delay in the implementation of the -3 reduction to school boards to September 1. And one of the main reasons for that was the recognition that to effect that change earlier than September 1 would be very, very disruptive in the classroom and would affect student classrooms immediately. As well, the fact that most teacher contracts in this province would be up at the end of August 1987 was another major reason for delaying that implementation to September 1. I think it was a very important recognition or a statement by this province of the very high priority which we place on education.
Well, Mr. Speaker, they certainly do place a lot on education. No doubt the trustees are doing a fine job, but we've contacted a couple dozen school districts to determine how they are coping. In almost every case, the result is similar: cutbacks and higher property taxes. In Calgary, over 600 staff positions lost. My question to the minister, I've heard her talk about a partnership. Is this the partnership that she talks about working? First of all, she does the cutbacks and the money, and they take the political flack when that happens.
Well, Mr. Speaker, despite the efforts by the Leader of the Opposition, the education community is responding, and is responding well, to the issue of fiscal restraint. They are looking at the priorities in this system. Yes, it is going to mean some reduction in jobs. Yes, it is going to mean some different delivery in terms of program, but the programs will continue to be delivered, and in fact the quality can be maintained in spite of that reduction.
Supplementary question, Westlock Sturgeon.
Mr. Speaker, to the minister, she's copped out of her chore by saddling the dirty job onto the trustees. So would the minister go so far as to make the appropriate legislative changes and funds available so that we could retire a number of the teachers early and thereby create more openings so that there'd be less layoffs.
Well, I'm pleased to have that suggestion from the Leader of the Liberal Party, Mr. Speaker. My first priority in the education budget, as I have said frequently in this Assembly, is the delivery of basic education programs to the students in the system. If that should extend beyond that first priority into funding an early retirement program for teachers, I think it's a notion which the honourable member may well put on the order paper and we could fully discuss in this Assembly.
Second main question, Leader, the supplementary, Red Deer South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Supplementary to the Minister of Education. Could she indicate to the Assembly the percentage of the overall budget that education received in last year's budget, and what percentage have they received in this year's budget?
Well, as noted in the budget address, Mr. Speaker, the proportion spent on education in this year's budget is up from last year's. I think an even more telling figure is the fact that the reduction in the education budget was about 1.9%, whereas the reduction for all other government service programs in other than the health, education, and welfare fields was down by about 16%. Again, Mr. Speaker, it speaks very clearly to the very high priority we place as a province and as a government on the very fine quality of education we have in this province.
Second main question, Leader of the Opposition.
Second question to the member for Edmonton Avonmore.
Thank you. My questions are addressed to the same minister, and they relate to the exodus of qualified Alberta-trained teachers from the province. On June 4th and 5th, the Alberta Teachers Association is sponsoring a jobs fair to help teachers and education graduates find jobs outside of Alberta. This year's entire graduation class faces unemployment this fall. Over 500 have already registered for the job fair in Edmonton alone, and it is estimated that some 2,000 teachers could leave the province. Does the Minister of Education have any explanation for this exodus other than the education funding cuts?
Mr. Speaker, the honourable member for Edmonton Avonmore is not correct when she says that the entire class of graduates from our universities are facing unemployment. It is true that there will be some of those graduates who will be unable to find the teaching jobs that they wish, and I regret that. However, I think we have in place a system which is trying to add some of those teachers into the system, and I applaud the ATA and its efforts to try and find jobs for those teachers who will become its members.
Mr. Speaker, the loss of these teachers represents an important loss to Alberta, not only in skill and expertise, but also since Alberta taxpayers pay at a low estimate $35,000 to train each and every teacher. My question is, what can the minister offer to these teachers to encourage them to stay here other than an attempt to defend the budget that has already resulted in a loss of hundreds and hundreds of teaching positions?
Mr. Speaker, I cannot guarantee every qualified teacher in this province a job, nor do I believe it is a responsibility of government to do that. There is clearly a difficult fiscal situation in this province. We are all setting up being part of that, including teachers. I think the efforts of many people to employ those teachers is laudable. I also think that we have to look forward to a time when we will be able to be employing more of them. But again, it is a question of balance. We have new teachers. We have new teachers moving into the system, even now, despite the allegations made by the honourable member, and hopefully it will return to a more normalcy within some time.
Mr. Speaker, short-term gains will result in long-term losses, especially the teachers will need in the coming years. Will the minister explain how she can continue to claim that forcing school boards to teach reduce teachers' aides, preparation time and in-service training, increase class sizes, increase numbers of multiple grade classes, increase user fees, increase the time young children spend on school?
Thank you, honourable member, for that succinct supplementary. Minister? No. Order, please. Honourable member. Minister, response, please. Question was out.
Obviously, the first priority, as I have indicated in several questions, is the quality of education delivered to the student in the classroom. We have been very fortunate in this province over the last many, many years to be able to continue to fund the system of education, which has seen it grow. Now is the time, however, where we can look at what we're doing, ensure that the most important purpose of education, which I will argue is on student learning, meeting that goal, and then beyond that, certain other priorities are going to fall below that priority level.
Mr. Speaker, to the Minister of Career Development and Employment, in view of the fact that 43% of first-year students taking basic English competency exams at the University of Alberta failed, that 20% of adult Canadians are functionally illiterate, and 265 English classes in the Edmonton Public Schools have more than 35 students in each class, what assurance can the minister give that cuts to education will not have a significant negative effect on the future employment opportunity of today's students?
Well, Mr. Speaker, as the Honourable Minister of Education indicated, we cannot guarantee in education that there are going to be jobs for education students. We can't guarantee engineering students that there are going to be jobs for engineers. All we can do is create an environment in this province that is conducive to the expansion of the economy. We recognize the difficult times that we are facing. All of us who have gone through university recognize the risk that we take enrolling in certain programs, and that may be that the demand is not the same at the time we enroll as it is at the time we graduate. That does not mean to say, Mr. Speaker, that we cannot pursue our objectives or our goals in other manners, but certainly as the Minister has indicated on other times and as the Premier has indicated, we cannot use education as a job creation program, Mr. Speaker. It's to educate our young people.
Mr. Speaker.
Supplement.
Sir, I don't wish to leave on the record the premise to the member's question where she spoke about split classes and several other things. Split classes in this province were not created as a result of a -3 in education grants, which will take effect on September 1. They've been around for a long time, and they'll probably continue to be around for a while.
On to save teaching and support staff jobs, and at the same time to help maintain the quickly eroding quality of education. Smack two birds with one.
Education. I would say quite the contrary. I would say that the focus that has been brought to education and healthcare as a result of our restraint program, our fiscal responsibility, has given people a clear understanding of their priorities, Mr. Speaker. With regard to lotteries, Mr. Speaker, it is our view in this government that the lotteries are well served by areas of culture, amateur sport, and recreation. And it will continue to address those issues, and it also will be continued to be used in areas of greatest need, Mr. Speaker, and I can give the honourable member that assurance.
Red Deer North.
Mr. Speaker, to the Minister of Education, can she indicate to us whether declining enrollments in either elementary or high school is having any effect on demand for teachers?
Well, in fact, Mr. Speaker, our enrollment in this province over really the past decade has been relatively constant, and yet over that same period, the increase in support by this province to education, given a provincial population which has grown by about 25%, we can survive a very difficult time. We can help it. We're working from a strong base, and therefore the fiscal restraint program is, in fact, very creative.
Leader of the Liberal Party.
Mr. Speaker, my question today is to the Minister of Agriculture. The grain, Mr. Speaker, the grain price is lowered by 18%, and subsidization of grain occurring throughout the world. The future of the grain farmer in Alberta is certainly in jeopardy. Now, to compound this serious situation, Mr. Speaker, there's the threat of disruptions to grain transportation this coming summer. Now, can the Minister inform the House as to what investigations he has done for possible labour disruptions farmers face this year in moving their crops to market, in light of the fact that some 10 union contracts which affect the movement of grain to export markets have expired. In most cases, negotiations are deadlocked.
Mr. Speaker, we are monitoring the situation very closely. As the honourable member from West Loch Sturgeon should be aware, those contracts do fall under federal jurisdiction. And the last time there was a dispute, the federal government, under the leadership of Pierre Kidiou, the Minister of Labour, reacted very quickly to avoid, as best as possible, any labour disruption to the movement of our grain.
I take it, Mr. Speaker, it's put our faith in the federal government, and he or she will look after you. Is the Minister aware, Mr. Speaker, that could he tell the House if he has investigated reports that Saudi Arabia has recently bought 300,000 tons of French barley because of the loading delays they encountered in our Canadian ports?
Mr. Speaker, in response to the honourable member, I'm more than happy to look into the allegations that he's just brought to light in the Legislative Assembly, and I will report back to the honourable member.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Anytime you need to know anything about the department, give me a call. Supplementary, what steps will the Minister take to ensure that loading delays at Canadian ports do not result in future trade losses for Alberta producers?
Mr. Speaker, that is exactly why we acted so promptly in times past when there has been labour disputes, encouraging the federal government to involve themselves very quickly, even to the extent of involving themselves prior to the contracts expiring, so that hopefully they can be renegotiated to avoid any type of a port closure. We're going to continue, as I indicated earlier, to monitor the situation and to continue to make representations to the federal government, as we have done in the past, so that in the event that there is any type of a dispute, they will act very quickly so that there will not be more cause or more harm brought to our already depressed grain prices.
Mr. Speaker, I would also, final supplementary to the Minister, he is leaving too much, Mr. Speaker, to the federal government. I just don't understand his faith there. Has he investigated, for instance, the possibilities of using the American railroad system and ports, trucking systems, or railroad all the way across to the Atlantic ports? Are we still staying with the old systems?
Mr. Speaker, I'm going to ask the Honourable Minister of Economic Development and Trade to supplement my answer, because transportation does fall under his responsibilities. But let me indicate that, contrary to what the honourable member has indicated, whereby we have left our obligations to the federal government, we've done everything but that. This government has been more forthcoming with their support for the agricultural sector, whether it be the grain sector or the livestock sector, and we're going to continue to support, Mr. Speaker, as best we can during these difficult economic times. And even acknowledging these difficult economic times, we have been more forthcoming with our support than any other province in Canada.
Calgary-Milligan.
Supplementary question, Mr. Speaker. On the expediting of the movement of our grain, the transportation, has the Prince Rupert Terminal helped at all, the one that this province built in BC?
Mr. Speaker, with respect to the movement of commodities on the national rail system, all of us in this Assembly are aware of how important it is to Alberta that we are able to move our goods and services economically and efficiently to market. And we have worked cooperatively with the national government, which has jurisdiction over our railway systems, in the development of legislation that is now before the House of Commons, the National Transportation Act. With respect to alternate modes there are some significant changes in the National Transportation Act that could lead to expansion of trucking, for example, as a mode to move grain to ports. As well, Mr. Speaker, the government has for a number of years held the view, as a result of consultation with Alberta farmers, that it is important that the crow benefit be paid to the farmer. And that would also make it far more possible to use other railways other than Canadian railways. Now, with respect to the question by the member from Calgary-Milliken, the throughput at Prince Rupert has increased dramatically, and we expect that in the current crop year it will reach its design capacity, and that is handle 3.5 million metric tons of grain. So it has been a success, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Member for Vegreville.
Mr. Speaker, to the Honourable Minister of Agriculture, in terms of problems, transportation problems faced by grain producers this summer, has the Minister contacted the federal minister responsible for the wheat board and expressed his strong objections to the proposed or to the planned 5% increase in grain freight rates effective this August 1st?
Mr. Speaker, I have not done so because we were so gratified at the $60-odd million that they did bring forward to offset the increased costs for the transportation of our grains. And it's noteworthy that a number of the major farm organizations also commended them for their forthcoming approach in offering additional cash to offset the transportation costs of our grain sector.
Leader of the Representative Party, followed by the member for Calgary-Glenmore.
Mr. Speaker, my question is to the Minister of Hospitals. In this legislature, we have had a lot of discussions on the 3% cut. We've also looked at some solutions. One of the problems I see is the matter of active care treatment beds in our hospitals being used by nursing home patients. Could the Minister indicate what the severity of that problem is, and what are some of the solutions that are being worked on at the present time to remedy the situation?
Mr. Speaker, yes, I can. The most difficult problem with respect to an actual surplus of active treatment beds and a shortage of auxiliary hospital beds exists within the city of Edmonton. The situation is not nearly so bad in the city of Calgary or elsewhere in the province. In the city of Edmonton, we have at the present time about 3,500 active treatment beds in the city proper, plus there's surrounding hospitals that increase that level, and that's, of course, without Alberta Hospital, the mental hospital in Edmonton. That's about 600 more beds than is in the city of Calgary, and in Edmonton there are about 360 patients who've been assessed for either auxiliary hospital care or nursing home care that are presently resident in active treatment beds in hospitals in Edmonton. One of the things that we've done, and perhaps most important thing over the longer term, is to reach an agreement with the Edmonton General Hospital on the operation of the Mill Woods Hospital that will see a reduction of some 150 active treatment beds in total there, but the addition of some 348 extended care beds. That will alleviate a good deal of the problem in Edmonton, but that doesn't come to play until about 2 years from now. In the interim, however, I had sent a letter some time ago to all hospital board chairmen suggesting that they may wish to convert some of their existing active treatment beds to auxiliary beds, thereby alleviating this situation. That was responded to from a number of places in rural Alberta, but I had no response from the large metropolitan hospitals. Since that time, because of our budgetary reductions, a number of hospitals in Edmonton, Calgary have closed, either temporarily or permanently, some numbers of beds. So I've now taken the initiative of contacting some of the hospital board chairmen in Edmonton, Calgary. I talked to two of them this morning about the possibility of now converting a number of their beds, depending on the physical location of them, bearing in mind that some of them are surgical beds, some are medical, some may be pediatric or whatever. I've now asked them to...
Thank you, Honourable Minister. Perhaps we could leave a little bit more for a few supplementaries. Little Ball.
Mr. Speaker, the Minister is doing very well. The specific hospital that I'd like to ask about is and the Minister started to refer to it, the Foothills Hospital in Calgary has had a plan to take one of their units that have been closed because of the cutback and change it into a nursing home facility. I believe the Minister's answer was to imply that this process would be acceptable, and the Minister would be willing to look at that alternative being proposed.
Mr. Speaker, because the honourable member didn't indicate what hospital, I had no choice but to start with Edmonton and work my way south. If I could be permitted to conclude with respect to the situation in Edmonton, which is the most serious, I am hopeful that there may be a way in which at least 4 hospitals in Edmonton, Charles Camps, the Edmonton General, and Misericordia, and the Royal Alec might be able to accommodate some movement in this regard. The situation in the Foothills Hospital in Calgary with 816 beds is that they have at the present time about 40 extended care patients, 35 of whom have been assessed for auxiliary hospital care and 4 for nursing home care. Again, with regard to Foothills, I am hopeful that there may be some way in which that hospital can, for a temporary period of time until we're able to bring on additional auxiliary hospital beds in Calgary, move some of those beds which are now empty into long-term care. The difference, of course, is that in the Foothills Hospital, the average active treatment hospital bed costs about $400, while an auxiliary hospital care bed with the proper level of nursing care is about $100. One has to bear in mind that you simply can't insert 3 or 4 or half a dozen auxiliary beds into an active treatment surgical or medical ward. You must have them all together in order to bring down the level of nursing care to get that cost factor in there. So there are a number of things to be worked out, but certainly it's possible.
Mr. Speaker, supplementary to the Minister, the Foothills as well has a no layoff policy in the hospital. It's been because of the relationship between the AUP and the management of the hospital. Would the Minister also consider directing his department to study the full Foothills management labour workout with an eye to implementing the same in other hospitals across the province? There must be some kind of a relationship there that could set an example in terms of other management.
Actually, Mr. Speaker, our department does not implement the policies of various hospitals with respect to their labour management operations. That's a matter for each individual hospital to decide. In most cases, hospitals have the Alberta Hospital Association bargaining on their behalf relative to any kind of an agreement they might have with their various unions relative to whether or not there's any layoffs. It's not my understanding that the agreement between the Foothills Hospital Board and the various unions represented in the hospital in fact prevents any layoffs. My understanding is that the hospital has worked with the unions toward that end on a voluntary basis. We have encouraged other hospitals to do the same, and my information, Mr. Chairman, is that very few hospitals have had to lay off any staff at all, and those who have oftentimes begun immediately hiring them back as soon as other attrition occurs with respect to people leaving the system. So, in summary, there is not at the present time any problem whatsoever, as far as I'm aware, with people being laid off en masse at hospitals.
Tony Plain.
To the Minister of Hospitals and Medicare. Given that the senior citizens in the Stony Plain area have mounted a campaign and petition to draw attention to the lack of a single auxiliary bed in the constituency, an area of 2,200 square miles, would the Minister give assurance that he would receive the petition and give adequate study to the problem?
Mr. Speaker, the Stony Plain area has to be considered in the greater Edmonton context in terms of auxiliary beds, and as I've just indicated, there is indeed a surplus of active treatment beds and a shortage of auxiliary beds in the region. Certainly, Mr. Speaker, if the priority of the community of Stony Plain and its surrounding area and its MLA is for auxiliary beds rather than active treatment beds, that's something that we would take into consideration when we have an opportunity to next consider capital projects request, which will be for the budget year beginning in April of 1988.
Edmonton Goldbar, followed by Edmonton Centre. Supplementaries.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. No doubt the idea is right to convert empty acute beds to auxiliary or nursing home beds. But, Mr. Speaker, the hospitals are already reeling under the cuts. Will the minister undertake to make funds available for these necessary conversions from acute to extended? It's not just as simple as changing the name of the bed. This is going to require arranging physical, the circumstance.
No representation after the question, honourable member, please. Minister, response. Let's go.
Well, Mr. Speaker, what we've been looking at is the possibility that we could have a number of hospitals who have active treatment beds that are empty or that have been closed as a result of the budgetary reductions, use those beds at a level of staffing appropriate for auxiliary care. That will reduce costs. In most of the major hospitals in Edmonton, we're looking at close to $400 a day for an active treatment bed. It's about $100 a day for an auxiliary bed. So you could open 100 auxiliary care beds, for example, for the price of 25 active care beds. So there's a great cost saving to be obtained right in the hospital itself.
Thank you. Edmonton Centre, supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Could the minister please outline with his bed conversion policy how many active treatment beds in rural Alberta will cease being active treatment beds?
I don't know that yet, Mr. Chairman, because it was in about mid-February that I wrote to all hospital board chairmen across the province and suggested to them they may wish to consider the policy of converting some of their existing active treatment beds to auxiliary beds, and I indicated to them that I thought that should be done in not less than groups of 5, because to have any less beds converted than that doesn't allow the proper kind of programming for auxiliary care. So that's not very long ago, and since that time boards have been inquiring as to what assistance might be available for any necessary conversions in their hospital or any necessary new programming to provide for auxiliary care. And until they've had an opportunity, which will be several months, to complete all of their investigations, also inquired about things like can they convert back, and if so, how soon. Until they've had an opportunity to do all of that, it would be impossible for anyone to know how many might be converted. But it is fair to say that there has already been a number of requests in that direction. There's already been 2 hospitals, active treatment hospitals, converted entirely to auxiliary care beds.
Very thorough. Thank you. Member for Calgary Glenmore, followed by Edmonton Highlands, followed, if there's time, by Calgary Buffalo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the Minister of Advanced Education, it appears that your Assistant Deputy Minister has endorsed a new age in advanced education, bringing cosmic consciousness to Alberta. In this spiritual and mystical tradition of human mind, a new system of teaching has been endorsed. Is this an endorsement of you and your department, and is it currently being implemented into the advanced system?
Well, Mr. Speaker, when I read the news reports of that forum, I wasn't very thrilled to see the involvement of one of the assistant deputy ministers from the department. I would never want to discourage the department from expanding their horizons or the fences when they're thinking. I know that's hard for some people to realize, that there's more than one way to approach a problem, but I think probably the mistake, as it was reported in the media, appeared to give department support or an endorsement of some sort to the forum. That certainly wasn't the intention. There was a participation in the forum by one of the assistant deputy ministers, and the forum was attended by some civil servants. But beyond that, I don't believe that any harm has been done, and I wouldn't want to discourage the members of the staff from exploring new ideas at any time.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker. Was this forum or seminar teaching this new technology sponsored and paid by your department?
No, it wasn't, Mr. Speaker. There seems to be some confusion about that. Again, the way letters went out from the assistant deputy, it did look as if he was a co-sponsor of the forum, but that was not the case. The only financial involvement the department had was by way of some registration fees for, I think, 7 people.
Final supplementary, Mr. Speaker. Does the minister anticipate other religious groups wanting to share benefits of their religion with members of your department?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm not sure if it's correct to put a religious adjective in front of the forum, and I'm not sure it's fair to criticize it because it was different. I've looked, when I heard about it, I looked to see about some of the other people that have been involved, and there's some names of national repute involved in these forums. But no, I wouldn't want to see us get involved any further in exercises of that connotation.
Perhaps the honourable member could wait for the honourable minister to sit down, and then indeed the chair is only too willing to recognize now Edmonton Millwoods.
Mr. Speaker, to the minister, does the minister agree that perhaps it would be in the public interest if he would review this matter within his department and look at issuing clearer guidelines to senior departmental staff to avoid any appearances of conflict of interest?
Well, let's get this clear, Mr. Speaker. I don't think there was any conflict of interest or dereliction of duty. Some of the news media have indirectly, I believe, criticized any apparent involvement of the department in this. It was, I think, a 2-day forum, and I don't think there was any conflict of duty involved there. Certainly the assistant deputy that was involved realizes very clearly now that it was an error in judgment.
Edmonton Highlands, followed by Calgary Buffalo.
Nice try, Dave.
Yeah, right. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to address my question today to the Attorney General. I was hoping that I wouldn't actually have to ask this question this session, Mr. Speaker, but the fact of the matter is that for the last 3 months, a group of people near Red Deer have been operating a telephone automatic message system which I believe is conveying messages of intolerance and perhaps hatred. Would the Attorney General advise the Assembly what steps he has taken through his legal department to curb this particular use of the public telecommunications system?
Mr. Speaker, the telephone messages in question have been monitored on a regular basis to see whether in fact there was any breach of the criminal code or any other law. And so far, there's the view of those who have monitored the telephone message in question. It's their view that no breaches of the law have in fact occurred.
A supplementary question, Mr. Speaker. I'm sure the Attorney General is aware of the John Ross Taylor case in Ontario, in which the Federal Court of Appeal has upheld the original decision on a very similar matter. Would the Attorney General agree to himself monitoring, given that he is a practitioner of the legal profession, to determine whether or not he, as the highest spokesperson for upholding law in Alberta, recognizes that no law is being broken in those messages?
Mr. Speaker, that matter is in the hands of experienced personnel who deal with this matter on a regular basis, and it's not necessary, in my view, to personally monitor those telephone messages. I have been kept informed, and that no breach of any law has in fact taken place, and I therefore don't find it necessary to doubt the word of those who are reporting to me on that subject.
Well, supplementary question, Mr. Speaker. I too have listened to the messages, and I'm not convinced. I wonder if the Attorney General will indicate at what point he will put a stop to this use of the telecommunication system in this way. What will it take for the Minister to act?
When the law is being broken, action will be taken. And until such time as the law is breached, it's not my view that we should step in. And there is an issue here as well, as distasteful as some of the messages may be to the honourable member for Edmonton Highlands, and perhaps to myself, based upon my reading of what is in them. There is still the matter of expression of opinion, distasteful as I find those opinions to be, and as I have expressed before in this Assembly and outside. That is something that one must handle with a great deal of care in a society which believes in the freedom of speech.
Final supplementary question, Mr. Speaker, perhaps to the Minister of Labour responsible for the Human Rights Commission. I wonder if in this instance the Minister might be inclined to contact the Human Rights Commission to determine if they themselves would like to find mechanisms by which this type of intolerance could be abated.
Mr. Speaker, the Human Rights Commission would certainly investigate any specific complaint that was made on this matter by somebody who had felt that their own rights have been impinged upon. But when one has to dial the telephone number in order to get a response, it's difficult to see it from that standpoint.
Supplementary. Meadowlark.
To the Premier. Mr. Premier, obviously the most successful way of counteracting this kind of message and the problem that it entails is to have people properly educated in these matters in our province. Would the Premier reconsider his decision not to establish a Commission on Tolerance and Understanding at this time and work to establish one that could properly address these issues in a broader context?
Mr. Speaker, I will once again consider the honourable member's representation for the future.
New member for Calgary Buffalo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is to the Minister of Career Development and Employment. We in the Liberal Party are, in fact, supportive of the many worthy cultural and sports causes for which lottery funds are being used. However, we are very concerned about the way in which expenditure decisions have been made in the back rooms of the Tory caucus without legislative authority and without any debate or review in the legislature. I was wondering whether the minister, Mr. Speaker, would be able to tell us how much the government now has sitting in its private lottery pot. We heard a while ago $110 million. Is it 120? Is it 130? How much is it in fact?
Mr. Speaker, I can't give the honourable member current rundown. I don't follow it on a day-to-day basis. But certainly if he'd like to make it a motion for return, I'd be pleased to consider responding to that.
Well,
that's reassuring.
How astonishing. Now, supplementary to the minister, lottery expenditures have never come before this legislature for debate, for review, or for questioning. What authority does the minister imagine the government has for spending lottery money since the expenditures are not approved by this legislature, and since neither I nor the Auditor General nor anybody else I have ever consulted...
Order. Order. This is a seeking of a legal opinion, and by the member's own understanding of Beauchesne raises a certain number of difficulties, to say nothing about the matter of a certain civil action which was brought on at least two members of this Assembly.
Order, Mr. Speaker. This law, Mr. Speaker, certainly is not asking a legal opinion, and is certainly not within.
Order, please, honourable member. Order, please. Supplementary question to the minister.
I see the Speaker is aware of my views on this matter. How does, if I might ask the Honourable Minister, how does the government decide what a portion of lottery funds is given to the beneficiaries? Is it decided by a caucus committee? Does the minister decide alone? Does he consult a Ouija board? Just what is the mechanism by which it's done?
Time for question period has expired. Might we have unanimous consent of the House to finish this series of questions? Opposed? Chair hears a no. Orders of the day. Might we revert briefly to the introduction of special guests? Indeed, the Chair apologizes. Chair apologizes to the member for Buffalo. There was a point of order.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With respect to the sub judice rule, the perception that this is an improper question because the matter is before the courts. The convention that I had understood that this House follows would be that of the convention in the federal parliament, and one which is becoming increasingly followed in the British Parliament. I would refer to Section 335 of Beauchesne, which indicates that in civil cases, Rule 337, subsection 2, that in civil cases the convention does not apply until the matter has reached the trial stage. I would also refer the Speaker to Erskine May, sometimes referred to as Erskine and May, page 343, paragraph 11, which comments to the same effect in that House, page 378, the paragraph headed Matters Awaiting Judicial Decision, and page 429, the second last paragraph on that page. This is a matter which clearly has not been set down for trial and certainly should fall within the convention that questions may be asked, in addition to which I might refer to the principle underlying that particular convention. And as I understand it from paragraph 335 of Beauchesne, the intent of that is not to prejudice third parties, not to interfere in proceedings relating to third parties. And this is a matter which involves the government itself and does not have inherent in it a matter of third-party interest. Insofar as the question of legal opinion is concerned, I was certainly not requesting a legal opinion of the minister, but simply a perception of what authority is, or whether there is any other authority other than that of normal spending authority in the legislature through the budget process, which has not been followed in this instance, upon which he relies. And I believe there is quite a significant amount of precedent for that, Mr. Speaker.
The Chair appreciates the alacrity with which the member had done his homework and started to quote the various subsections, and so indeed the Chair will take those into consideration after examination of the blues. But the Chair also refers back to the Honourable Member Beauchesne, citation 371. And in fact, there were also some other matters that were being raised in the hearing of the Speaker as the various supplementary questions were being raised.